Our next guest speaker this afternoon is a man who is a speaker, an author, and a director. He's a gentle soul who prefers hugs over handshakes. He's written many books, the first of which was the interestingly titled The Work We Were Born to Do. And in the world we live in, a world of individuals, he believes that we are all the answer to each other's prayers. So please give a warm welcome to Nick Williams.
I feel slightly wrong-footed now. That was my kind of talk in a nutshell. So I think really what I want to talk about is how wonderful we are. I'm a student of something called A Course in Miracles. I don't know how many of you have heard of A Course in Miracles. It's described by some people as a book of spiritual psychotherapy, which is enough to make most people feel sick, I think. I like to think of it as a love letter from our Creator. And the message of The Course in Miracles is basically you're asleep to just how amazing you are. And the book is the wake-up call to wake up to how amazing each of us is. So that's the essence of my message today, is we are already what we're seeking. Like most people, I'm going to share a little bit of my kind of story with you, just to give you a context. I guess when I was young, I thought success was something to get. And still a bit of me thinks success is something to get. But the larger part of me now thinks that success is something to be. And actually it's who we already are. I don't know if you've heard that expression about have success, but not at the expense of your soul, but at the expanse of your soul. So when I was younger, I didn't feel particularly whole. I felt like I was lacking a lot. So I felt I needed to be successful to feel better about myself. How many of us can relate to that? You know? If I'm honest, I didn't really realise this until probably my late 20s, early 30s. I actually felt a bit of a failure, really. So part of my kind of journey was I felt very driven to be successful because I didn't want to have to feel how bad I really felt about myself. I almost wanted to succeed myself away from my bad feelings. Does that sound familiar to anybody? It's like, well, if I'm honest, I don't think I feel that good about myself, but if I can have a successful career, if I can have a nice girlfriend, all that stuff that we were just kind of hearing about, then I can get to feel good about myself, and then I don't have to feel bad about myself. So I managed that for about 30 years probably, kind of avoiding the bad feelings that I had. And I had a series of kind of corporate jobs, and by my late 20s, on the outside, anybody looking at me would have gone, you're reasonably successful. But I don't think anybody would have had much idea about how bad I felt about myself on the inside. And for me today, looking at success, for me, my journey of success has been much more about what I would call a deeper and deeper self-acceptance of all that I am, of both my spirit and my brilliance and my greatness that I think is in everybody, but also to be able to love and accept and make friends with the bits of me that don't feel good, the bits of me that I think are weak, parts of me that I just don't like very much. So for me, one of the ways that I think about success today is how much of myself can I love? Because the more I can love of myself, the more I can love of other people. But whatever I can't accept about me, I'm going to find hard to accept about you. So one of my definitions, or principles rather than definition, principle of success is how much of me am I at peace with today? Because there was so much of me that I wasn't particularly at peace with. So I was, perhaps another way of saying what I'm talking about is that I used to think success was a place to get to, and now I think success is a place to come from. Does that make sense? To find that part of us that's already whole, that's already peaceful, that's already powerful. Because I don't know about you, but however much success I got, it never seemed enough. You know, I think Robert touched on it this morning, maybe Jeff as well, about, Robert talks a lot about how for him success was always in the future, it was never now. And how many of us can recognise that success is something that's always just that little bit ahead of where we are. It's always that elusive thing that we think we're going to get there, but when we get there, that wasn't quite it. You know, one of my dreams, I left a corporate career and started another career, starting my own business, doing training and doing my best to inspire people and be a kind of role model of what's possible. One of my dreams was one day I'd love to write a book. If only I could write a book, then I'd really feel good about myself. And if I could get the book out to the world, then I'd feel a success. And at the age of 38, I think it was, 39, I wrote my first book and I got it published. It went out to the world and it became a reasonable bestseller. But I was quite shocked at how empty it still left me feeling at times. Oh, I better write another book then. Now I better write another book. I'm writing number 9 at the moment. So part of me is still addicted to, you know, if only. But then I also think I've now tapped into a deeper part of me that I'm going to talk about, which is the part of me that's just got an awful lot more to say now. That I hope has developed more wisdom, who has a bigger heart than I used to have for myself and for other people. So my writing and what I do today is a way for me of sharing kind of more of me. So I'd like to do just a fun little thing for a couple of minutes. Because the title of this talk is Unconditional Success, and it's the title of a book I wrote. It was actually my second book, I think it came out in 2001, about unconditional success, because I wrote that book in a way to share some of my own kind of struggles around never quite feeling the success that I wanted to feel. And when I got involved in more kind of personal growth and spirituality, I think, you know, I wouldn't necessarily put it this way at the time, but the way I would say it now is I was trying to find that part of me that already felt a success, that wasn't trying to prove it, but wanted to be it. So are you up for a little exercise? You're all going to have to come to the front for a minute, or a few of you are. I bought these yesterday. These are gold stars. What I want you to do, so some of you come up and take one of these off me and share them out with other people. I just want you to take 2, 3, 4 of them. And go round and find 2, 3, 4 other guys and just stick a couple on them and stick one on each guy and tell them you're an unconditional success. So it might take a couple of minutes for you to get your hands on some, but there should be enough for everybody to take 2 or 3 of these if you can stand up and grab some. So share them out and get 2 or 3 for yourself. Go and meet 2 or 3 other guys and tell them they're an unconditional success. So stand up, everybody stand up, please.
Yeah, go that way. We're going, you're okay.
That's the caravan. It's also good to receive.
You're on conditional success.
Everybody got at least one?
Unconditional success. Thank you.
Get another one. Thank you very much. So everybody got at least one? Anybody not got one yet? Okay, great. Start to grab your seats again.
Here you go, Michael. Thank you.
The first question, does that feel good to be told you're an unconditional success? Yes. Yeah? How many people find it hard to believe? You know, part of me kind of believes that perhaps, you know, the true spiritual path is when you really know that. When you really know that you are an unconditional success. And that isn't arrogant, but it's just the truth of who you are. That's when we've kind of come home to who we are. You know, I don't know how many of you believe in a God or a creator or a source of love. My belief is that in God's eyes we are an unconditional success. It's our personality that causes the problems. You know, we live in a world of such conditionality. You know, we're lovable if, we're lovable when, as long as we do things, as long as we don't do things. And for me, you know, my path is to daily remind myself, why am I doing it? Am I trying to prove something, or am I aiming to come from a place of sharing? Any other thoughts about that as you were doing it? Who enjoyed giving them out? Yeah, isn't it lovely? You know?
I think that why is such an important one, because most people know what they do, how they do it, but why they do it.
Yeah.
And that why is a big one.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm thinking about God at the moment.
Yeah.
Why I do what I do.
Sure.
So I know what I do and how I do it, but why I do it.
Yeah, so I'm going to share a few of my kind of thoughts on that. And it was interesting when we were asked right at the beginning of the day what our definition of success was. You know, what came to me as I answered that question for myself is to put love first. If I'm not doing something to somehow uplift myself or others, why am I doing it? So for me, that's the purpose ultimately of everything. And I'm not saying I do that every day. I forget, I get absorbed in things, I get lost at times. But that's my North Star. It's like, am I sharing love? I'll just share, if I may, a little story that taught me a lot about this. Just a few years ago, my father died 8 years ago, in 2005, at the age of 85. And I was very blessed to have a very good relationship with my father. I had stuff, but there was always a deep love between us that was expressed frequently. And in his last couple of years, he had kidney failure, and we knew he was deteriorating, and he had about 3 weeks in hospice towards the end of his life. And I was with him when he died, and it was a great privilege to be with him. But what I saw with my dad over the last few years of his life was that there were so many things that he loved and that were important to him. And he had a very strong faith. He was a Christian. He had a very strong Christian faith. But what I saw as he deteriorated was, little by little, all the things he loved doing and being and enjoying, he couldn't do anymore. He loved music, and he was going deaf. He loved gardening, but he didn't have the energy to go out in the garden and lift stuff anymore. He loved literature, but couldn't read. His eyes were too bad. But what was amazing was he was still happy. And he gave me such a gift in understanding how little sometimes you need to be happy. He was losing everything that meant a lot to him, other than the love of his family and friends, and yet he was still happy. And I just took so much from that, going, well, if he's dying and he's losing all his faculties, and he's still happy, that really shows me something about what we are capable of as human beings. That we, in a way, need so little to be happy. And one of my other definitions of success is, it almost sounds too simple, but it is, are you happy? And I think, I don't know about you, but I almost don't trust that sometimes. That's too simple. And I don't mean like a shallow happiness. It's like, you know, having a cappuccino that makes you happy. But are you just happy being in your own skin? Are you just enjoying who you are? Are you enjoying the blessings of your life? Are you seeing the blessings of your life? Because I can still so easily get addicted into wanting more and doing more. And then I just have to remind myself, but there's so much I've got that I'm forgetting to notice. You know, and I do my best to just see what a fantastic life I have, rather than wanting a better life all the time. But the paradox is, the more I see the goodness in life, or my life, it seems the more goodness gets added to it. And I don't know about you, but one of my biggest challenges growing up Methodist, my father was a Methodist preacher, is I seem to carry such a huge amount of guilt. Am I the only one who carries guilt? So, you know, am I in the right room for guilt, or am I the only one? You know, what I noticed was even when I had a lot of success, I didn't allow myself to enjoy it. So for me, there's another, it's both kind of a human thing and a spiritual thing around success, which is returning to a place of what I would call innocence, I suppose. You know, I just shared with you about my father. And I had some issues with him. I was angry with him about certain stuff, and, you know, I had resentments against him. And when I knew that he only had at most a couple of years to live, I set myself a goal, which was to be at peace with him by the time he died. And I managed that. There was pretty much nothing going on between us by the time he died. But the other thought that came to my mind was, I want to be his son again. I just want to be able to receive his love. And because I was angry with him, then I felt guilty that I was angry with him. So when he was kind to me, I sometimes couldn't receive it because I knew that I was actually quite resentful of him. So one of my goals was that by the time he died, I could just accept his love for me. You know, even on his deathbed, he said to me, you know, from the moment you were born and I held you in my arms, I loved you. And for a father to say that to a son, you know, when the father's in his 80s and the son was in his 40s, was, to me, just so beautiful. But the important thing for me, and Robert touched on this morning, was my ability to truly receive his love. How many of us know if somebody gives us love or gives us, you know, positive stuff, we somehow deflect it. Sometimes we go, no, it's nothing. You know, yeah, you know. So I really do think that one of the aspects of success is learning to be a really great receiver. You know, somebody said this once, and I wonder how true it is. I think it probably is true. Whatever you believe in, what if God, what if life, what if the universe is trying to give us so much, but it's our own sense of unworthiness, it's our own sense of guilt that blocks us receiving it. And to me, perhaps today, one of the kind of, I don't know if it's a definition, but my thinking about being a spiritual leader in the world is somebody who's really, really willing to receive every good thing and share it with other people. Like Robert touched on it this morning. To me, true success is wanting for everybody what you allow yourself to receive. So that you allow yourself to have success, so that everybody else can have success. That you allow yourself to feel loved, so that you can extend that love to other people. That you can allow yourself to feel blessed, so that you can bless other people. That you can know your own unconditional worth, so that you can see the unconditional worth of other people. So, I'm kind of slightly being sarcastic, but there's a truth in what I'm saying. It's like there's a price to pay for being successful. And the price is giving up fear, giving up guilt, giving up feeling a victim. And being willing to be a kind of innocent child of life again. Does that resonate at all? It's certainly been my journey, and you know, it's going to be my journey, I think, for the rest of my life. It's just allowing myself to receive more so that I can share more. You know, if somebody had asked me 20 years ago, are you creative? I would have given them an absolute no. I didn't feel there was a creative bone in my body. I grew up believing that I wasn't creative. I grew up believing that creativity was a hobby. It wasn't valuable. You can never make a living out of what you were creatively interested in, unless you were somebody special. So I've been on a kind of 20-year journey of reclaiming my own creativity. And I think, again, one of the things I've come to think is that to be an artist, like Clark was talking about before lunch, to be truly creative, we become divine instruments. I believe that each of us are here to bring universal ideas into this world. And I think, certainly, the first 30 years of my life, the success that I was striving for and achieving to some extent was what I would call now the very masculine side of success. And for me now, I balance that, I hope, more with more the feminine side of success, which is about receiving inspiration, receiving ideas, and then using the more masculine part of us to put those ideas out into the world, to reach the people that we're here to serve. I was introduced with this idea, and it's something I've been thinking about for the last year or two, and I'm thinking about it more and more, is that I don't believe we show up in this world as a blank slate. I think we show up in this world as highly individuated souls with veterans of many lifetimes, with skills that we've developed, talents and abilities that we've developed, emotional patterns and programming that we've inherited. We don't turn up as a blank slate. I believe we turn up with, I was going to say an agenda, but that's not the right word, a curriculum for this life. And part of that curriculum is to show up and share particular gifts with each other in this world, I believe. Because, over my life, there have been so many people that have come into my life at particular times and have been just the right person at the right time. Whether I was conscious of it or not, they were the answer to my prayers. And as I've been blessed over the last 20 years to consciously do things to positively impact the lives of other people, through my writing, through my speaking, through my coaching, through broadcasting, and to hear the impact that I've had on other people, I've really come to the belief that each of us are here to kind of minister to each other, that each of us has particular unique gifts and talents that are exactly what other people in this world need. And that our job is to get past our fear, get past our resistance, and show up with who we are and the gifts that we have and share them with each other. So another element I would add to the kind of inquiry about success is not just about what you have or what you do, but is that success is you expressing the very kind of deepest aspects of your own heart and soul. To be able to listen deeply to what you are being called, invited, prompted, inspired to bring into being in this world. Because whatever you're inspired to bring into being in this world, there are people that are hungry for you to do that. It's humbled me in a good way over the last 20 years. There are people that I've just been immensely grateful for showing up in my life. And I still find it hard to believe sometimes that there are people that are equally grateful for me having shown up in their lives. I used to think it was arrogant to believe that, but now I'm more and more thinking, but that's just the nature of life. We're all here to show up and share our gifts and our love and our talents with each other. So as that expression goes, who are we not to do that? Who are we to hide our light? That it's actually arrogant to hide our light and to believe that we haven't got anything to share. That's the arrogance. It's not the arrogant to think that we have got something to share. Does that make sense? Yeah. So for me, I've had to reverse my Christian thinking about arrogance and pride. And for me, being a student of A Course in Miracles has helped tremendously, because in the Course in Miracles they have a couple of concepts that so struck a chord with me when I read them many years ago. And the Course says you can be in your grandiosity or you can be in your grandeur. And what it says is your grandiosity is of your ego. So, what I've noticed for myself, and I see it in so many of us, is that when we forget who we really are, we end up inventing an idea about who we are. And anything that we invent is going to be grandiose, because never is it going to come close to the truth of who we are. So to say I'm the best healer in the world is grandiose, because I think everybody's got healing powers. To say I'm absolutely useless and I've got nothing to share is grandiose. So we go into grandiosity by inflating ourselves, we go into grandiosity by deflating ourselves. How many of us can recognise that we can easily go into grandiosity in our own head? Either thinking I've got to be the best or I'm going to be the worst. I'm useless or I've got to be brilliant. And the Course in Miracles says both of those are of your ego. Grandiosity, whether inflation or deflation, is of your ego. But then it says your true nature is grandeur. You were created in grandeur. So I think the invitation for all of us to think about success is showing up in our spiritual grandeur, to show up as who we were created as, and to kind of accept that each of us has incredible powers, incredible talents, incredible gifts right now. But I've found, excuse me, over the last 20 years, one of the hardest things for me to do is kind of unwrap what's within me already. There seems to have been so much of me that has been against me. Does that make sense? You know, how many of us have ever had a brilliant idea and not followed through on it? You know, of course, we all do that. How many of us have repeatedly brilliant ideas that we don't follow through on? Yeah. You know, most of us are real experts at getting in our own way. I would have put myself down as a gold medalist in getting in my own way at times, and still at times. You know, anybody reckon they could get a gold medal in that too? You know, squashing themselves, you know. And I'm not saying all this to make you feel uncomfortable, because I'm going to share with you some ideas about how I've got past what I call my own resistance. So I want to share with you a couple of ideas now that I've just found immensely helpful in my thinking and my feeling about success. One is, I hope, and I'm to the best of my ability playing an active part in trying to, if you like, shift the world from the idea of motivation to extending it to also include inspiration. In my early days of kind of getting into the personal development, spiritual growth world, I was very much into the motivation way of doing things. Right, I've got to set myself a list of goals as long as my arm, and I've got to achieve them in the next 3 weeks, otherwise I'm an utter failure. Anybody ever had those kind of feelings? You know? So it was like setting goals, and now how am I going to motivate myself to get those goals? Anybody ever been on Tony Robbins' workshop? You know, walked on hot coals, you know, all that stuff. It was great, I'm sure. I got a lot out of it at the time. But I found it really hard to sustain a sense of motivation. And I learned a couple of things, and I think one of the things was, I actually didn't want a lot of the things that I thought I should want. It was like I made up things that I thought I should want. They weren't really my goals in the first place. They were just things I thought I should want, that I should want to achieve. Because then I'd be me, or then I'd be pleasing people if I achieved them. So the first thing was I realised I wasn't even motivated to do them because they weren't even my goals. And then secondly, I began to get more into the idea of inspiration. And here's the thing that I think makes the difference. You know, I do work a lot in companies, and I work a lot in organisations, but I also work a lot with what I call solo entrepreneurs, people that are running their own businesses, doing something they love and that is personally meaningful to them. And what I found is that in organisations, they talk a lot about motivation. And I know I'm going to oversimplify this, but I'll do it anyway. I think sometimes motivation is trying to get people to do what they otherwise wouldn't want to be doing. So the only way to motivate people is really with carrots and sticks. It's like, I know you don't really want to be doing this, but if I dangle a big enough carrot or I hit you with a big enough stick, would you do it? And to me that, you know, that's just not sustainable over time. It works for a while, but after a while you go, you know, the sticks have got to get bigger and the carrots have got to get bigger, and you know, you can't eat enormous carrots anyway, they get boring. Where are you going to store all the carrots? So the shift for me was about moving more into inspiration. And the way that I define inspiration is to light a fire in my own heart and to light a fire in the hearts of other people that will never stop burning. That in a way doesn't need external input to keep it burning. I think once you start to connect to your own sense of inspiration, it may just start off as a little flame, but my experience is that flame just grows and grows and grows. You know, I said to you, if you'd asked me 20 years ago whether I thought I was creative, I'd have said no. I'm writing book number 9. I've got more ideas to implement that I'm inspired to do in the rest of my life than I've probably got time for. My sense of inspiration has never been greater. So I think the more you get inspired, the more you are inspired. So I want to share with you my favourite quotation on inspiration. And I'll share it with you and then I'll tell you where it comes from. Some of you may already know it. It says, when you are inspired by some great purpose or some extraordinary project, all your thoughts break your bonds, your mind transcends limitations, and your consciousness expands in every direction. Dormant forces, faculties and talents become alive in you, and you discover yourself to be a greater person by far than you ever dreamed yourself to be. How many of you know that one? It comes from Patanjali, who's the founder of the Yoga Sutras. It's written 2,300 years ago. And to me, there's several key aspects of that. You know, it says when you're inspired, your thoughts break your bonds. I think when you're inspired, you start thinking with a mind that is greater than your logical mind. But that's often where our resistance and our fear then begins to kick in, because our logical mind wants immediately to know, well, how's this going to happen? How's this going to work? So we come to that in a minute. Second thing that's significant, when you're inspired, dormant forces, faculties and talents become alive in you. Now, I just love that idea. How many of you have never known you could do something until you did it? Yeah. You know, I think one of the biggest problems we have is that we're waiting in a way to be inspired, rather than acting to activate our inspiration. You know, I've coached so many people who say, I'm not quite ready. I'm not quite ready to start my business. I'm not quite ready to start writing my book. I'm not quite ready to get into a relationship. I sent out a tweet, and I think I put it on Facebook about 6 months ago. I'm probably going to put it out every couple of months. And it sounded a bit negative, but I hope you take it in the positive vein that it's meant. The tweet I put out was, give up all hope of ever feeling ready. How many of us are waiting to feel ready to do something significant? Yeah, we're never going to feel ready. Our ego is always under construction. We're always waiting to feel confident enough, good enough about ourselves, until we've got a few more grand in the bank and we've got a cushion to do something. Until I know that I've got all my ducks in a row, until I've got all my plans together, until I've got a perfect business plan, then I'll start. And if I could share just one bit of advice that's got me from selling computers 23 years ago in a job that I no longer enjoyed, to get to travel around the world doing something that's hugely meaningful to you, the one tip would be, do it before you feel ready. I've never felt ready to do anything. Never felt perfectly ready to do anything. I've just gone ahead and done it anyway. Sometimes in the face of a bit of fear, sometimes in the face of massive fear. But here's the secret, nobody knows how afraid you are. You're the only one who knows. Nobody else is telling you you're not ready. It's only the voice in your head that says you're not ready. It's only your own personality, your own ego speaking to you. Here's another little mantra of mine. Your soul is always ready to do what your personality is never ready to do. Now, I don't say that to invite guilt or any kind of shame. It's just that realization that when we get hooked by our ego, we're always waiting. Or distracting ourselves, or doing something that's almost what we want to do, but not quite what we really want to be doing. So does that quote about inspiration resonate with you? You know, that quote has been the cornerstone of my life, really, for the last 20 years since I came across it. In a way, I've made my life a living experiment in that quotation. And then the last bit of it that I think is so significant is, when you follow your inspiration, you discover yourself to be a greater person by far than you ever dreamed yourself to be. I heard a lovely little distinction between motivation and inspiration a while ago, and the distinction was, motivation is the realization that you can achieve more. Inspiration is the realization that you are more. And the more that you realize you are more, the more achievements will flow naturally from you, I think. Does that make sense? Whereas, motivation is like, well, I could do this, but like, you were just saying, sorry, I don't know your name, but you were saying, going back to why are you doing it? And often so much of why we're motivated to do things is often from a place of lack. I think when we're coming from a place of inspiration, we're much more coming from a place of fullness, a place of wholeness, a wanting to share rather than a wanting to get. But again, the paradox is, my experience is the more I share, the more I get. The more I share what I'm inspired to share, the more I'm given to share, and the more I'm given, as long as I'm willing to receive. So how many of us live a life of inspiration already? Great. So you're probably going to recognise this next bit, and those of you that aren't living the life of inspiration that you'd like to be. So let me just finish off one little point there. One of the things I say is, let your fuel for success be inspiration rather than motivation. I think inspiration is a higher octane fuel for what you want to do and be and achieve in the world than motivation. And I'm not saying motivation is wrong, I'm just saying it has a different quality to it sometimes. So let me share with you the second part of the equation. We've touched on it already, but this is something that I've done a huge amount of personal inquiry into. And it's the idea that inspiration has what I call an evil twin. Just to share a quick story with you, and then you'll get the idea of what I mean by inspiration has an evil twin. About a year or two after my first book came out, The Work We're Born to Do came out. At the time I was living in Tottenham, in North London. Now I live in Finchley, not far away. And I was coming in from Seven Sisters on a Monday morning to a meeting in town. And I'd forgotten to bring anything to read, so I looked around the train carriage, and this was 10 years ago, it's not around now. I picked up a Miss London magazine, and I was flicking through it, and it was all job adverts for women. And I had this brilliant idea that came to me, and the brilliant idea was they need a career coach to write a column for them. Coaching women about, well, how do you find the work that you really love to do? The subtitle of my book is Do the Work You Love the Work You Do. So wouldn't I be a brilliant guy to write a column for them? Miss London magazine would be fantastic, what a match. I've just read a book called The Work We're Born to Do, wouldn't that be brilliant? So I held that bright, shiny thought in my mind for about 30 seconds, and then these other thoughts started to creep in. It's like, okay, my book's 350 pages long. A column would probably only be about 500 or 600 words. I'm not sure if I can write short. Maybe I can only write long. Miss London magazine, they're really well known. They could choose anybody. Why would they choose me to write a column for them? If they did let me write a column for them and then I ran out of ideas or I wasn't as good as I thought I was, I'd feel really guilty and embarrassed, wouldn't I? And you know what? They've probably never heard of me anyway, so why bother? How many of us can recognise from inspiration to blowing your idea out of the water in 30 seconds? That's resistance. That's the evil twin of inspiration. I used to hope that there was going to be a day when I would wake up and not have resistance. That day has not yet come. I'm 55 and it has not yet come. So what I've learned for myself is to firstly make my contribution to life, and secondly to be successful in a way that's meaningful to me. I daily have to encounter and get beyond my resistance. On a good day, my resistance is mild. On a bad day, my resistance is sometimes pretty chronic. And on a bad day, my resistance says, who the heck are you? Who wants to listen to you? What have you got to say? It's all been said already. What have you got to add to the good of the world? Who do you think you are? How many of us can recognise those kind of voices? Yeah, that's really nasty resistance. And, at a more surface level, resistance is things like, yeah, I really am going to do it, but I'm just not quite ready. I'm just going to study a bit more. I'm just going to go on a few more courses. Just going to do a few more workshops. Just going to get a few more letters after my name, then I'll feel confident enough. I'm just going to wait until the kids have grown up a bit more, and then I'll have a bit more time and space to myself. It's all the kind of excuses, it's the procrastination, it's the planning but the not implementing. All of those are forms of resistance. Anybody reckon they don't have resistance? Anybody who's not put their hand up, liar, pants on fire? And the thing I really want to get across is we all experience resistance. I think it's part of the human condition. I truly believe that nobody has a greater capacity than anybody else to be inspired. Because if inspiration truly is the ability to access spirit and come from spirit, I think everybody has an equal spirit. I don't think there are greater or lesser spirits. There are greater and lesser manifestations of the universal spirit. But that doesn't mean anybody's spirit is greater than anybody else's spirit. Personally, I don't believe that. When Jesus said in the Bible, these things and you and more ye shall do, he wasn't saying, I'm the only one that can do this stuff. He's basically saying, you can do it. You have miraculous powers. You have incredible abilities. And for some people that might seem heretic to say that, but I think it's the spiritual truth, to be honest. Our ego can take it and turn it into grandiosity, but the truth of who we are is that we're amazing. So, we can all be inspired, and we can all trip ourselves up and get in our own way and fall prone to our resistance. So my kind of invitation to you is don't fight resistance, because when we fight it, we actually strengthen it. For me, there's a number of ways to get past our resistance. I'll just share a few of them. I think Robert touched on it this morning, and Jeff certainly touched on it. I'm a great advocate. In terms of purely, if you like, the practicality of creating success in the world, I used to think you had to have some magic chromosome that I didn't believe that I had to be successful. And if I could just, my kind of biggest tip for success today is just take a step. Just take the step in front of you. I think you can pretty much do anything by just taking one step in front of another. Just take today's baby step, tomorrow's baby step, the next day's baby step. When I started writing and thinking about writing a book, I was overwhelmed by the idea of writing a book. My advice to budding authors today is don't think about writing a book. Write the first sentence. Write the first paragraph. Write the first page. Write the first chapter. Write the second chapter. Take baby steps. Everything, when you think about it, is created through one action after another. I think it was in the Tao Te Ching, it says the great task is achieved by a series of small acts. So I think we sometimes think unless we can do something massively big and significant, it's not success. But I am a great believer that take tiny, at times tiny steps of success, and then when it's appropriate, take big steps of success. I get to do some pretty amazing stuff. I really love what I do in the world. And I realise that so much of what I get to do is because I did a lot of stuff in the beginning that wasn't very sexy. But because I was willing to do the not so sexy stuff, I got to do a lot of very sexy stuff. I got to do a lot of stuff by, if you like, serving an apprenticeship. Often people appear on our horizons and we think, well, they were an overnight success. I don't know how many of you have listened to Michael McIntyre talk, the comedian. He kind of came onto the circuit a couple of years ago and is now probably one of the most highest paid comedians in the country. What you don't hear about is the 10 years he spent travelling the country doing the small clubs. He served his apprenticeship to get to do the other stuff. But I think there's also a time we have to also be aware of where we may be playing too small. That our resistance can also get us playing small. So there's times to do the apprenticeship, and then there's times to graduate. And that's often when our resistance can kick in, when it's actually time to graduate. I believe that as we kind of, whatever the word would be, as we complete a task or as we complete a project in our life, and we've grown, the next project will be waiting. But sometimes our resistance will blind us to the invitation to graduate to something bigger and more significant. But I don't mean significant necessarily in an ego way, but it's like to reach more people, to inspire more people, to touch more people, to have a bigger positive impact. Because then our ego often kicks in and goes, well, who are you to be doing that? And that's why it's so helpful for me to keep going back to that idea of grandiosity versus grandeur. I think we're always being invited to step into a greater level of our grandeur. But each time we do that, I think our grandiosity can sometimes kick in and go, who are you to do that? Who do you think you are? So baby steps is a great way of beating resistance. Personally, just picking up on what Robert was saying earlier about, the unhealthy independence. I used to think that doing my own thing, i.e. running my own business, meant I had to do it all alone. And I'm now increasingly, not just of the opinion, but it's the way I live my life. I live my life as a series of partnerships and collaborations now. I used to think it was weak to ask for help. Now I see it as a sign of weakness not to ask for help. I've just had a very interesting experience over the last 7 or 8 months. I've got to the age of 54 and I've never had a significant illness. And at the end of last year, in November last year, I was travelling to give a talk in Khartoum in the Sudan, and I guess I picked it up there and I picked up hepatitis. And I came back. I wasn't well, but then about a month after I came back, I ended up being very ill. They didn't know what was wrong. I ended up getting taken into the Royal Free Hospital and was pretty much debilitated for a couple of months. I felt so incredibly weak. And it was so hard for me to realise how weak I was and just accept it. And not see it as a failure to feel so weak that I had to have people running around for me and looking after me and nursing me and caring for me. And that's what I mean, I was touching on at the beginning about deeper self-acceptance. The journey for me over the last 8 months has been accepting my own weaknesses. As a grown man to realise how weak I can feel at times. But not to hate my weakness, but to love my weakness and accept it and know it's just part of me. So a deeper and deeper acceptance of our need for help, whether that's spiritual help by asking for whatever we believe in, our deities, our angels, whoever we call upon for help. What if the problem is actually that we're not asking for enough help? I don't know what this image would look like if you ever tried to draw it, but what if God was kind of tapping his fingers going, well, I'd love to intervene in your life, but you're not asking for my help. I'd love to help you, but you've got to ask. And we go, no, I couldn't bother you. What if there are angels kind of standing around going, I've not been asked for any help. I can only intervene where I'm being asked to help. What if we just forget to ask for help? And what being ill also helped me see was there are people that love to help. There are people whose joy is to nurse you, me, us. Whose joy is to minister to you, to love you in the way that you need loving, to take care of you in the way that you need taking care of. For me, it's been a really kind of heart-opening lesson to open up to allowing people to love and care for me in ways that I hadn't allowed people to love and care for me. And trying to be, Mr. Do It All on my own. So another way you get through resistance is by collaborating, by asking for help, by forming networks of people that are cheering you on. And another way through resistance, I think, is accountability. In my head, I can often say I'm going to do something, but if I don't share it with anybody, nobody would know if I ever did it or not. I think there's tremendous power in making ourselves accountable to people outside ourselves. I think that's why, the coaching profession has taken off so much on one level. We just want, I think, firstly, we want somebody to care about us and our goals and listen to us. And we want somebody to say, so when are you going to do it by then? We want somebody to hold us accountable. Because how many of us have ever said we're going to do something and not done it? We wriggle out of our own accountability. I think ultimately we can be accountable to ourselves, but sometimes it's really great to have other people that are holding us to account, going, you said you were going to do that. When are you going to do it? Have you done it yet? So another way through resistance is sometimes we do need to learn stuff. Resistance can be endlessly going on workshops. I call it being a perpetual student. For a number of years of my life, I was what I would call a perpetual student because I was afraid to step up and be a teacher and a leader, or to lead. So for me, at times, there are things that I just don't understand. And if I try and figure them out on my own, I'm never going to get there. For example, a couple of years ago, probably 4 years ago now, I looked at Twitter. And I looked at it and I went, this looks like it could be a monumental waste of time. I could spend hours a day wasting my time, not getting anywhere with this. So I thought, what do I do? So I opened a Twitter account, I started following a few people. By synchronicity, I ended up finding this guy called Mark, who lived in High Barnet, which is only a couple of miles up north of Finchley, where I lived. I followed him, I found out he was an expert on Twitter and business in the UK. So I sent him a message saying, I see you live in Barnet, I only live in Finchley, do you fancy having a coffee? He said, said, sure, let's have a coffee. So we had a coffee in the Spires in Barnet. And he started talking to me about Twitter, and within 20 minutes, the lights went up. I suddenly got, now I can see how I can engage with Twitter, maybe only spend 20 minutes a day on it, and get it to work for me and for the people that I want to serve. But I could have left on my own, I could have spent years trying to figure it out. So sometimes education gets us through our resistance. So it's a paradox sometimes that education can feed our resistance, but sometimes know-how and education can get us through our resistance. Does that make sense? Yeah. And now I'm going to share with you my favourite way that I get through my resistance now, and I invite you to kind of take on board if you want to get through yours. There's probably two sides of it. You know, whenever you've had the taste of the expanded life that comes with going beyond your fears, it's very hard to deny it again. When you know what your purpose is, when you know what you're about, it's hard to run away from it. When you plateau, you just get bored. Your life doesn't work so well, you're low energy. So I think life wants us to be in a high energy. So the way I get through my resistance now is, I suppose the way I would distill it would be to say, I choose to be of service to life. You know, I think of the people that have come into my life who've been the answer to my prayers over the years, and I just kind of reflect sometimes and think, well, you know, if that person hadn't turned up in my life, where would I be now? You know, Robert, who was on this morning, we've been friends for 20 years. If he wasn't in my life, if he hadn't showed up for whatever reason and we hadn't become mates, my life would be so much poorer. I'm grateful for him showing up in the world so that we got to meet each other. I'm sure you could write lists of people that you are so grateful have shown up in your life. So here's the twist. What about those people that are already in your life benefiting from you, but would benefit from you showing up at a new level? Who are the people that are waiting for you to show up with your love, with your inspiration, with your gifts, with your heart? So my prayer each day really is kind of, dear God, give me the strength to get past my resistance so that I can show up in the world. And for me, there's a big difference between showing off and showing up. You know, I don't know about you, I was told when I was growing up, don't show off. So I used to think that wanting to show up in the world was an act of showing off. I now believe that to truly show up in the world is an act of spiritual generosity. I truly do believe that we are the ones we've been waiting for. The miracles are sitting in this room. The miracles are us. We are the ones that There's a lovely line. How many of you know Marianne Williamson? Do you know Marianne Williamson? She's a spiritual teacher and writer. She's actually giving a talk in London on Monday night and lives in LA, I think. And there's a line in one of her books, and when I read it, I wanted to cry, and I almost get emotional even sharing it now. She said, you know, we prayed to God for a miracle. God answered. He sent you. We are the answer to each other's prayers. We have got so much to unwrap in each of us. You know, part of my purpose today is to unwrap as much of myself as I can and share it, to inspire other people to unwrap as much of themselves as they can to share it. Does that make sense? I truly believe if everybody unwrapped all of who they were and all they had to share, the world would be transformed. We don't need a miracle, we are the miracle. We just need to realise that we are. And we need to get beyond our grandiosity and show up with the grandeur that we are. Does that make sense? So thank you. I'm a success. I've even finished on time. So thank you very much indeed. I hope that's been